Hello and welcome to Kankakee County Area Football Talk right now. That's what the title we're going to go with. I'm Steve Soucie, and I'm joined today by one of the newest members of the Friday Night Drive team, Mason Schweizer. How are we doing today, Mason?
Doing great, man. We've made it through all of our preview copy writing and getting ready for the season, and now we're just 48-ish hours away from kickoff. A little less. We've got some Thursday night action around the state too, so it's here. I'm excited. I know that you're the most excited person in the state too right now.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those times where it's just like, can we hurry up and get there? I mean, Friday night is right around the corner, but as far as I'm concerned, if it was tonight, I'd be a little bit happier. So, well, let's dive right into it. I mean, traditionally, when I would start a discussion about these teams, I'll start with what was classically called the city teams in our parlance, and let's talk a little bit about Bradley-Bourbonnais, opening the season with a little bit of a different look. Some guys that have been around for a while are no longer there. Open the season with a home game against TF North. What are your impressions and expectations of the Boilermakers this year?
For this season, I think, judging off what I've heard from Coach Cole and what I've seen from this program the last few years, they're pretty high. They feel like they continue to have more and more offensive firepower. Anyone who's been around this area knows that the Edmond brothers, Lizelle and Kyron, Rontez Smith, Isaac Allison, Calvin Cole, those are a ton of different weapons for new quarterback Ellis Johnson to have. The defense returns a lot of kids, especially in that secondary. TF North is going to be a pretty tough test week one. That's a program that really rejuvenated itself the last couple of years and continue to have that going on track. But for the Boilers, they've built this program up the last few years, and I think that this is the year where they really think they're going to see like that next leap. The last 3 years they've had first round playoff loss, then a second round playoff loss. Last year they got to the quarterfinals. They think that progression should keep climbing.
Tell me a little bit more about your impressions of Ellis Johnson, obviously a quarterback situation that has been handled pretty successfully over the last couple of years by Gavin Cole, and now we're transitioning. What kind of quarterback is he? Do we expect a little bit different look from the Bradley offense, or are they trying to kind of maybe keep those trains on the same track that maybe they have been before?
So Ellis is about as seasoned of a new starting quarterback as you can have. He's been around this program for 4 years. He's been up on varsity since he was a sophomore, working more in special teams that sophomore year, but he's the guy, taking snaps. His sophomore year, he played back up to Ethan Cole because Gavin, Ethan's younger brother, was playing receiver. Gavin comes in to play quarterback last year. Ellis is his backup too. So he's been the backup for a couple of years. He saw some action last year. I think he may have even started a game last year. So he's a kind of a bit of both of the last two quarterbacks they've had. He won't run it quite as much as Gavin Cole ran it last year, but he will use his legs to his advantage. He's a pretty good athlete, and he's got a pretty strong arm, good awareness in the pocket. And one thing he told me over the summer was just adjusting. Once a play gets going in varsity, it breaks down, adjusting with your legs, extending a play, things like that. He's gotten a lot more comfortable. When a play doesn't go exactly how it's supposed to, he's still comfortable back there and can make a play.
Switching gears now a little bit to what has become a really interesting kind of non-conference rivalry that has developed, Kankakee and Nazareth. Kankakee going through what seems like it's been almost kind of constant recently, another coaching transition. What is your impression of what's going on at Kankakee? Because to be honest with you, I see them as a little bit of a kind of a wild card this year. I'm not really sure what we're going to get from the K's. What have you seen?
I think a lot of people think of them as that, and it's funny when this, like you said, this has become a bit of a non-conference rivalry with Nazareth. They're going to be their fourth meeting in a row. The first three all a possession or less. It's funny when this meeting started right after Kankakee had gone to state. People were wondering, was that just kind of a 1 year sort of thing, or is this Kankakee program going to kind of start to solidify itself? And here we are 4 years later, and I think the answer is pretty overwhelming. They've solidified themselves despite, like you said, being on their third head coach in the last, 4 years. But it's interesting because they are to that point where, yeah, they graduated a lot of really good kids last year, but they don't expect to drop off anymore. They expect to kind of keep that level set. They've been to the 6A quarters the last 2 years, probably / possibly down in 5A this year. Um, they've got kids at the top like Cedric Terrell the third, Philip Turner. Those two stand out the most when I think about it. But just kids that are gonna keep this group as they transition to a lot of new faces, getting them up to varsity speed, understanding what the atmosphere is going to be like against the Nazareth on Friday night and against the Lincoln Way East in week 2. They've got kids who have been starters since they were freshmen in the trenches, like Jair Sutton on defense and Demir Green on offense, kids who they don't know anything but varsity football, and they've gotten really comfortable there. And with Coach Ed Hazlett, the guy who kind of started that defensive mindset in their turnaround, he's back as the head coach, and they think that they're just going to keep things rolling, and they might not be wrong.
Moving on to the last of the three quote-unquote city schools, this is a team that really intrigues me this year just because I think they look so different. Bishop McNamara has a Saturday date where Lawrenceville's coming up from Southern Illinois to give them that non-conference game. But the impression that I got when I saw them a little bit this summer was they don't really resemble the team that I saw last year. A lot faster, a lot bigger. It looks like this is a program that might be able to execute a little bit of a bounce back here. What's your impressions?
Yeah, well, when you and I were talking the other day, we were like, it's really hard to kind of peg where they're at because they have so much new around. I mean, Coach Youngblood, a new head coach, some really, really good kids that have come in the junior class as transfers, and Micah and Malachi Lee. This senior class has been, they've had 2 4-win seasons in a row. A lot of these kids are 3-year varsity guys, and they think that they're better than what they've been the last couple of years, and they're eager to prove that. And I know with the new stadium that they've unveiled, there's just a lot of excitement, a lot of momentum, and really, I think for you and I, a lot of curiosity on just how this is all going to come together.
Yeah, I think that like one of the things I saw them in a 7-on-7, and I almost did a double take when I looked down there, especially with some of the additions that they made via transfer. They just looked entirely different, and I thought that was a really fascinating thing. All right, let's move over to the Illinois Central 8 now and talk a little bit about what's going on there. Let's start with the overwhelming, seemingly year-to-year favorite in that conference, the Wilmington Wildcats. Lost a lot from that group that got to the semifinals last year, but over time, you and I have both learned that you can never, backtrack on thinking that Wilmington's going to be a turnout quality teams year after year. For me, a fascinating week 1 non-conference game for them. They travel up to Morris, a bigger school, but Wilmington has always had problems scheduling non-conference opponents. So they have to go up and play a traditional Power and Morris up there. An interesting start for a team that has quite a few pieces to replace. But like I said before, Wilmington always seems to find a way to replace those pieces.
And it's really interesting. How many teams are there that graduate their school's all-time leading rusher, but are still returning last year's all-state team leading rusher? Kyle Farrell graduating, Ryan Kettman's still back, and like you said, Soucie, under Coach Reens's tenure, like it's just been year after year, really consistent turnaround, and he's again got a lot of kids back at, in the trenches who weren't their biggest offensive and defensive linemen last year, but were some of their quickest, were some of their best at making those pull blocks that they need to do a lot, especially at the guard spots. Zach Olin coming back at linebacker as well. That kid's an absolute menace. Could be your defensive player of the year in that conference this year. Like you said, they've got it going on where it's just, it doesn't even necessarily matter how talented the kids might be. They just always figure it out. And Coach Reens always puts those kids in the best positions to just keep that thing going.
Moving on to Coal City, for me, obviously the huge question is, what do you do to replace Landon Benson, a guy who seemingly was everywhere doing everything, the old cliche, did everything but drive the bus. I'm not so sure he didn't drive the bus at times. It's definitely a huge void for them to have to fill. How do they go about doing that? And it seems like I guess a soft landing spot for them to start the season when they challenge Pontiac, a program that struggled for a few years. So maybe they have a little bit of time to figure out exactly what they're going to do to replace Landon Benson.
Well, Seuss, I think when we talked over the summer on here, I mentioned Connor Henline, their quarterback. He was a kid who really was inherited that job during the season when Xander Mentz got hurt and played well enough to have kept it, really. Xander was able to come back and be okay, but they're really excited about Connor. They've got a lot of their receivers back. They have a lot of linemen back. They really have almost everyone back except for Landon, except for Xander. I think maybe we'll see a bit more balanced offense. They do have a handful of different kids. I mean, Seuss, you know that Coach Masters in that wrestling program, they just churn out great athletes year after year. And I think some of those kids, maybe a Brody Wadlowski, Brock Finch, some of those kids might see some run in the backfield too. But they have a lot of really talented kids, a lot of really big kids back. Kid like Cade Pointer in the trenches, Emmett Easton. These kids were mauling people a year ago on that trip to the 4A semifinals, and they're all back and bigger.
Well, moving on now to a team that I'm pretty intrigued by for a couple of reasons. Herscher is playing Canton in the opening week of the season. I snuck down to watch them in their scrimmage against Clifton Central last Friday, and I was pretty impressed with what I saw, even in a limited role. The biggest concern that I have from Herscher when I'm looking at them is just not a lot of bodies on that varsity sideline. I mean, the ones that they do have look like they could be capable of doing some good stuff. I especially like the backfield mix that they had going on. Alec Draper looked really strong, and I think he's primed for a pretty good year. But they had a couple of other backs that showed me some flashes of stuff too. Mason Roberts was another guy that I thought that showed some stuff. But I'm really concerned about their depth. I mean, they were in the low 20s. It doesn't look like they're going to add much to that unless they reach down into the lower ranks. That's a concern for them, isn't it?
I think, that might be a concern for a lot of our smaller area schools aside from Wilmington and Coal City. But when you look at Herscher specifically, you talk about Mason Roberts. That kid is a cornerback. Tanner Jones, Gage Brown, that secondary is elite. But offensively, yeah, Alec Draper is going to man that backfield. Tanner Jones, the quarterback, he's a kid that's been around now for his third year. And his sophomore year was great. Last year, took a little bit of a step back passing-wise, did a little bit more on the ground. But this year, I think he can really probably put it all together. And you know this better than I do, but when you've got Hall of Famer Coach Wakey coming out of retirement to coach the offensive and defensive linemen, you know that they're going to be stout up front.
Moving on to Manteno, obviously a team that was pretty interesting last year. They have some voids that they have to figure out too. When I saw them this summer, talked briefly with RJ Haynes, the first thing that I had to get over is the beard is gone. So I that really gave me some pause. I was like, well,
wait,
what are we doing?
You see RJ? I did not see beard
this summer. Yeah, the beard is gone. It is gone. So yeah, that was the crazy shock there. But as far as personnel, let's talk a little bit about what they lost and what they have coming back.
Well, it starts with Nico Akiyama, who's been there for 3 years. He was a quarterback and running back for them. Cooper Monk, one of a few linemen that they lost. Cooper now at Illinois State. He was a huge piece of their line. They were very run heavy with that offensive line and with Nico and with the really mobile Connor Harrod. Connor, that kid can fling it too. He threw it a ton his sophomore year, was one of our area's passing leaders. I think we're going to see him kind of have the ball in his hands a lot, whether it's his arms or his legs. He's got his pass catchers back for the most part. So I'm really curious to see if, they got really close to getting to that next level. They got back in the playoffs. Now they're going to look to, have some playoff success, maybe contend and beat the Wilmingtons and Coal Cities of the world that have kind of ruled that conference the last several years.
Looking at Piatone real quick here, it's one of those things, they have developed kind of a consistent, maybe a step behind the Coal City and Wilmingtons in that conference. I'm just interested to know whether or not that's going to be able to maintain a lot of kids being put into new positions and new places for Piatone this year. But the one thing that program has seemingly been able to do over the last 5 to 6 years is they've been pretty consistent. Do you see that as something that they're going to be able to maintain?
I think so. They're another team that's a little lower in numbers, but they've got a lot of really talented juniors that Coach Siamis is really excited about. And, I told him the other day, if you want me to come down and see, I don't know if they'd give me the gas money, but I would not mind getting some to drive to Granite City this weekend. No, he's really excited about what this junior class can do. There's a ton of juniors. They only have a handful of seniors, but Tucker Kane being one of them, who's going to do a bit of everything, kind of like last year's Chase Rivera. Like you said, they've been very consistent, and playoffs are the standard there now. It wasn't always like that, but that's how it is now, and this group, I think, is going to be able to keep that going.
Okay, we're going to talk a little bit of Vermilion Valley football here in a minute, but before that, a word from our sponsors.
I like Reich.
I like Reich.
Since 2016, it's been my privilege to represent the people of the 63rd District. I want to continue representing you as an independent voice in Springfield.
I like Reich. We like Reich.
At Oliver's, we are proud to serve our community. We serve up great customer service, quality products, ease of shopping, and we serve up delicious barbecued sandwiches at our fundraiser cookouts. So stop by Oliver's, 748 North Brenton and Dixon, and help fund our local clubs and events.
Mason, you just corrected me. We forgot one of our Illinois Central 8 schools, and Reed Custer. Obviously, a program a little bit in transition, has struggled the last couple years. Yet another area school that's going through a coaching change. What have you been able to gather from what we should expect from Reed Custer this year?
A lot of mystery. I'm not really sure what we can expect. They're pretty young. They have a really exciting sophomore class. Forget if they won or made the finals of the IHSA baseball state tournament when they were in 8th grade. I know, they've shown some potential. Coach Klein, their longtime coach, offensive coordinator, his son Caden was a part of that class. He might end up at quarterback by the end of the year. They've got a state wrestler, and Dominic, I believe it's Ilimo. I always get his name wrong. Sorry, Dominic. But he's going to be playing some running back, it sounds like, this year. He's a big boy, really fast kid. Other than that, I'm really excited to see, like I said, they had a lot of seniors last year. So they'll be young, really excited to see kind of what this next chapter is going to look like in Braidwood.
Okay, switching gears over to the Vermilion Valley, touched on them a little bit earlier. Clifton Central, one of the programs that has consistently been a playoff caliber team. This is another team, like I said, I mentioned about Hersherd, concerned about their numbers. Boy, Central's numbers were really low as well at the varsity level. They did admit they were sitting a couple of people out just for safety's sake. But once again, what they have looks really capable. It's just a matter of whether or not they can keep enough pieces on the field and healthy all season long, because there's just not a lot of reserve to call on.
Yeah, 10 starters back on each side of the ball. That's a very good thing. But like you said, outside of those, there aren't a whole lot of kids there. We've seen this program. They're a 1A school now. And the sidelines are starting to reflect that, and just in terms of numbers. But like you said, the ones that are there, a lot of kids that have been around for a couple of years. Brody O'Connor, Caden Means up on that line. Evan Cox and Derek Ramirez have been the backfield going on their 3rd year together now. Brady Schule showed a lot of flashes at quarterback before he got hurt last year. He's got all of his receivers back except Aiden Podevich, who did everything for them last year. Quarterback, running back, receiver, wherever they needed him. He's graduated, but everyone else is back. Coach Persy coming in to replace the Hall of Famer and Brian Spooner. I've heard a lot of good things about this Comets program, and a lot of people think that they are one of, if not the favorite in the VVC this year.
Moving on to Moments, we've talked a little bit about them and what's going on with them. Feels like they've got a quarterback that's been there literally forever. Is that kind of where they're going to use the touchstone this year and moving forward this year?
Yeah, Eric Castile in his 4th season now. He's thrown for over 3,000 yards in 40 touchdowns, I believe, our last 2 years. That kid's the real deal. I think we're going to see him use his legs a bit more this year too, just because he's going to be the best athlete on the field when he's out there. But they do have a lot of new but experienced kind of in a way, like a lot of backups, kids that kind of were that 5th, 6th lineman last year. A lot of seniors up front. They've got a couple running backs that they feel good about, and Dakota Lukey and Philip Drain, receivers that they love, and Jaden Daw and Eddie Ferreira. Defensively, they're piecing things together. I know Eric's moving from linebacker to cornerback. So they're going to be young, kind of, I believe, 2 starting middle linebackers that are sophomores. But, I'm kind of that mind that until someone knocks you off that peg, you're still up there. There's a Moments team that was 8-1 in the regular season last year. And yeah, with Eric Castile, who could very well be the best quarterback in Class 1A or 2A, wherever Moments ends up, they've got as good a chance as anyone as long as he's around.
Watsika, a program that has had kind of a hard time getting a lot of momentum going lately. Another program that I keep hearing some numbers issues have been affecting them as well. What have you been able to gather on them in the offseason?
I'm very curious. I know Coach Franzen, I got to see him a couple times over the summer. He's really excited. And, Soucie, they've run a very run-heavy, a lot of double wing type of stuff offensively. And now they're bringing one of their running backs in to play quarterback in Austin Morris. And so I'm wondering if we're going to see the offensive scheme change a little bit to maybe reflect that, maybe use the quarterback to run more. Dennis Goodman, who's a great sprinter, he's back at running back too. All 5 of their offensive linemen are back. So Coach Franzen is probably in our area the biggest fan of offensive line play, I would say. So I know he's thrilled about that. I'm very intrigued by kind of what they've done this summer and the way that they're positioning themselves. They a 3-0 start last year before losing 6 in a row. I think they're going to look to get out of the gate red hot again this year.
And the last of the Vermilion Valley group, Iroquois West, obviously have had some tough times the last couple of seasons, winless last year. What's the take on the Raiders at this point?
Well, 4 seniors and 4 juniors, and the rest are freshmen and sophomores. So they're gonna earn some stripes this year. But so a lot of those sophomores did play a lot last year. One of them, when you've got a 6'4" sophomore that is going to play quarterback and linebacker for you, and Aiden Miller, I think that he's a good foundation. They do have some good speed, especially in the backfield. Julian Melgoza and Christian Gaitan, 2 of those 4 seniors, they were around last year, and they both fly, whether it's with the ball in their hands or flying to the ball. Just 1 win the last 2 years, but it's not that long ago that they were a really strong Class 2A program. So Coach Hamilton, who a lot of these kids played for when they were kids, he's in his 3rd year as coach. We'll see what they can do. They're going to be young. They'll take some growing pains, but I think by the end of the year, they're really going to have a good idea of where things are going.
Well, and on to the last area team, the only team in the area that is already 1-0. Dwight picking up that win over Lisle because that was their scheduled game for week 1. So Lisle not having a varsity program this year. So they're already 1-0. They're not playing this week. They did not pick up a game. So interesting thing about Dwight is they dropped their co-op with Gardner South Wilmington. So now they are a 1A program. And I think they made a little bit of a postseason run last year. So interesting things probably looking forward for Dwight this year.
Yeah, I know Aiden Colum, who was one of those key pieces of that co-op they had with GSW. He is now a Dwight student, so he's going to be back. And, God, that kid is a bruising, big, fast, strong running back. Coach Standiford is a great guy. I know he's worked really hard to get this program to where they were. I was at their playoff win against Moments in the first round last year, and there have not been a lot of moments I've seen like a coach and a program just take a deep breath, a sigh of relief, like, man, this was a huge monkey off our backs. And I've heard nothing but great things about them over the summer. A lot of people very high on them in Class 1A this year, and I'm excited to see how things shake out for the Trojans.
We've got a pair of 8-man teams, too, to touch on briefly. St. Anne and MCP. I know that MCP didn't think they were playing week 1, but picked up a game with Peoria Heights. And then, St. Anne coming off the school's first playoff appearance last year. What's going on with those 2 8-man teams?
Well, I was actually, St. Anne was my last stop to drop off this year's Friday Night Drive preview magazine. Go ahead and order you one if you haven't already. But I was out there dropping those off yesterday while Coach Root had the kids in the weight room. And, it's tough when you lose a kid like Chris Link that had over 2,500 rushing yards. But they've got a lot of seniors who Coach Rick Schoon told me when they were freshmen in basketball, before football was even a thing at St. Anne again, we've got high expectations for this group, and they're eager to show that starting now in football this year, something that wasn't an option when they started high school, but they want to finish it as a prominent football program. And then down in Milford, the first ever IHSA state champs back in 2018.
Yeah.
They've kept things rolling. They've been in every postseason since. I think with Dirks Newcomb back, he was one of the top passers in the state last year, a great runner as well. I think that they're going to once again be a factor and once again have a really potent offense.
I think I know, but what's your weekend schedule this weekend on Friday night? I believe you're taking in Nazareth and Kankakee.
You would be correct about that. I'll be at Nazareth and Kankakee Friday night. That game kicks off at 7 p.m. Saturday. I will be over at the new Rich Sinani Athletic Complex. I think I might end up seeing your face for a little bit there too, to watch Bishop McNamara take on Lawrenceville. And I'm really excited. I love Saturday games because I can take photos on Saturday games. It's my only responsibility. So can't wait to be on the sidelines this weekend at both of our Kankakee schools. And Soucie, have you figured out what your final plans are for the week?
I think I'm going to come over and catch a half of your Friday night game before hopping on air for Friday Night Live. I think I'm going to come over and see Kankakee and Nazareth. I'm interested in seeing both of those teams kind of solving some mysteries. Nazareth with their transfer quarterback from Pennsylvania that I'd like to get a look at. So basically, I think I'll be seeing a lot of you this weekend, Mason, because it looks like I might be joining you at both games. So look forward to that and look forward to all the games. And until next time when we can break down some results in week one. You got something there, Mason?
I just want to say, you talk about Naz, and if anyone wants the Nazareth side of this week one matchup, check out the rest of the podcast on the Friday Night Drive Network that you can catch the rest of our schools in different coverage areas other than the Journal. So Journal listeners, readers, there's a lot more than just this podcast. Go check out the rest of them too.
Good plug there, Chief. So until next time, we'll break down all of week one's results and talk a little bit about week two next week. But enjoy the high school football. I know I will, and I know Mason will. Thanks for joining us.